Well, the U.S. Army is once again getting away with killing civilians. The Pentagon investigated the killing of a mother, a 22-year-old mother, and her 4-year-old daughter in Somalia in 2018, and they concluded that nothing wrong was done. Nothing at all. This was published by the Intercept, and it is not happy reading, but I want to present it here for several reasons. First, to get you to support peace abroad, no matter what. So I guess I have an agenda. It's that. Also, these are things that inspire terrorists abroad and at home. This drone strike was targeting al-Shabaab fighters, but according to Scott Horton's reporting, dozens of people living in the U.S. have returned to Somalia to fight for al-Shabaab. So if you think that, oh, this is just something that happens, across the sea and it doesn't affect me, you're wrong. These things do inspire terrorists that are not just way over there. And 3, the war on terror does not work. It doesn't. It just makes things worse. No one has ever tried peace with these extremist groups. We just keep trying to kill them, inspiring people like them and harming civilians. The war on terror should be a cautionary tale, not a template, Israel. So let's look at the story. In the spring of 2018, a woman and her 4-year-old daughter were traveling to see her brother. She couldn't reach him on the phone, so she hitched a ride in the back of a pickup truck with some men. The brother actually passed the truck on the road as they were going in opposite directions. He tried to flag them down, but they didn't hear him. Now, this is an image of the brother. We don't have images of the woman and the child. The U.S. military does, though. They are mostly redacted. Her family has no pictures of her or the baby. Then the U.S. targeted the truck with drones under intelligence that the men in the truck were al-Shabaab fighters. They didn't know that the woman and the child were in the car, but when the bomb exploded, the woman and child ran away. The U.S. intelligence saw her running away and circled back and targeted her and the child, and they died. Her brother saw it all happen. He says that it was just horror, pieces of her sister strewn across the road. It's horrifying. And the U.S. military won't face any condemnation for this internationally, but they did commission what's called an AAR, After Action Report. During my review of this strike, I reviewed the procedures with personnel. Most of this is redacted, I'm paraphrasing. They confirmed that the procedures used during the strike were standard operating procedures, utilized for all redacted striked. Based on my review of these procedures, interviews with personnel, and review of strike videos and chat logs, nothing in the strike procedures caused this inaccurate call. So nothing in the protocol would have prevented civilian death. Basically, this next question, were civilians injured? The response says, I assess that 1 female and 1 child was killed in the strike. So we know it. It says, during the execution of the strike, did anyone disagree? It says, yes, there was disagreement, but only regarding the numbers, not the sex and the age. So we knew it. A woman and child were killed. Everything's good. Nothing couldn't have been avoided. So here the Pentagon says that some of the reason for this may be that some of the team members were inexperienced. You can see here they list how many years of experience each person had with FMV, that's motion video, like analyzing what they're seeing in real time. They said, one person only had 6 months of experience, so maybe, but there was someone else there who had 17 and a half years. So that should have balanced it out. It says, but they also were lacking software. Here I highlighted in red, saying that, they didn't have the most updated software. So maybe that's a problem. And also time was the biggest factor in the update. Now, analysts have later said, why was time a factor? We had them traveling down a road, a drone's in the air. They weren't like traveling into a crowded region. We had eyes on them for a long time. What was the purpose of rushing? And what is this software that you're missing? Like civilian scanner software? Even experts have told the Intercept that while she was running away, it should have been clear, like maybe you thought it was a man, but she had a child. A 4-year-old's hard to mistake for a combatant. This is much like a story that Chelsea Manning tells in their book while working for the Army in Iraq. Bradley Manning, produced reports showing that one target lived in one place and had since moved, but no one read his report. And then the military targeted that person at the old house, killing civilians. This is one of the things that made him so disillusioned and inspired him to be a whistleblower. But back to this report, these civilians killed, a lot of it is redacted, like this super unhelpful email thread. What I think maybe here are images, because like I said, we know that they had images of her body. We know that they had images of even her face as she entered the truck. Why then? That wasn't clear that she was a woman based on her dress. I'm not sure. It's worth noting that the Pentagon did announce this strike publicly, saying they'd killed 5 people. But they also said no civilians were harmed, and the Somali press refuted that. They said absolutely civilians were killed, and that's when the Pentagon launched an investigation, only because Somali press pushed back. And it wasn't until a full year later when they admitted here that civilians were killed. Now, the woman's family said they've never been contacted by U.S. officials for an apology or condolence, or perhaps maybe a little money or something to make them feel better. Nothing. While the report concludes that the military did nothing wrong, a drone pilot and strike analyst who served in Somalia in the same year that this incident happened told this to the Intercept. When I went to Africa, it seemed like no one was paying attention. It was like, we can do whatever we want. It was a different mindset from the special forces I worked with in Afghanistan. There was almost no quality control on the vetting of strikes. A lot of safeguards got left out. Well, how did this happen? How did the U.S. get so trigger happy in Somalia? Here is from Scott Horton's reporting from his book on the endless war on terror called Enough Already. He says, because this happened during the Trump administration, it's worth noting it's 2018, right? President Trump escalated the war, expanding the number of airstrikes, special operation forces, both those fighting and training the Somali National Army, and sent regular infantry there as well. He also signed orders designating Somalia as an active war zone, devolving strike authority lower down the military chain of command, and removing some restrictions on who can be targeted. That seems to me like a valid explanation. But he goes on to say that, according to the Washington Post, this was all despite the fact that Trump didn't even want to be there at all. He complained about the Army's useless mission in far-flung Somalia. He said, "Can't we just pull out?" The president repeatedly asked his staff in 2017, to which Secretary of Defense Mattis said, "You have no choice." Okay. So Trump escalated the war, killing many but accomplishing nothing. In his term, Trump administration launched more drone attacks on Somalis than Bush and Obama combined. Terrorist attacks and territory held by al-Shabaab only increased. Again, pointing to the fact that the war on terror always brings more terror. It has never worked. Are you listening, Israel? So again, this is yet another example of the lie of precision strike. This is a propaganda term coined by the Obama administration, the idea that you can target exactly whoever it is you want with no collateral damage. That is a lie. We've shown you this before. U.S. Army Colonel Amos Fox coined the term precision paradox. It means a situation in which the failed promise of a precision strike, one kill, generates a creeping wave of destruction. And that is exactly what we see. In fact, even though the Pentagon says that 5 people were targeted in the truck, the Somali government says there were 7, in addition to the 22-year-old mom and 4-year-old daughter. They also say that 2, if not 3, were not al-Shabaab. Here's from the Intercept again, saying that at least some of them you can see was a tax collector, a poet, and one was identified in the local press as Yusuf Dege. And others say there was an elder in the car, and most likely civilians. The U.S. Army didn't even bother to follow up on whether or not those people were there. They only confirmed the woman and child. So those are the only people that we know of, right? Because the U.S. government reluctantly admitted it. But what about the others who maybe weren't combatants? And we know that during the Obama years, the idea that anybody who was of military age was called a combatant whether we knew they had association with terrorist groups or not. So we can't actually trust even the 5. We don't know because that report is so heavily redacted. We don't know on what intelligence they were going on to target these people anyway. They could have all been civilians. We don't know. We know only for sure that it was a mother, a 22-year-old mother, and a 4-year-old baby girl. And I want to point out that me saying this is not anti-military, because these kind of things make our military less safe. The military, obviously, people who join the military want to be competent, want to do good, but this reputation of killing civilians makes their jobs harder because they are more of a target. It certainly makes civilians less safe, and it makes the American population unsafe because our reputation for killing civilians brings more terror back to us. And so it's awful. And, I think we should think about these things when we go to rallies and say no ceasefire, because again, the saying, what you resist persists. So let me know what you think of this. I encourage you to read not only the Intercept's great report on it, but also the report from the military, the after action report itself, because you need to know what our tax dollars are going to support. And what's the collateral damage. So let me know what you think of that in the chat below.